and once again raised urgent questions about protection, displacement, and the safety of civilians in Nigeria's rural communities. So in Kasuwan Daji in Borgu local government area, gunmen stormed the community earlier this month, killing about 30 people, abducting residents, and also destroying shops, homes, and livelihoods worth millions of naira. Now, since that attack, fear has taken over. Families are fleeing, parents are pulling children out of schools, and communities are asking a simple but very urgent question. Where is the security presence?
And our correspondent Sagir Ibrahim visited Kasuwan Daji and nearby Papiri to understand the human cause of this violence and the growing calls for military intervention. Let's take his report.
To understand the security situation in Niger State, you first have to understand the terrain. It is a journey across rivers and through ungoverned forests to many far-to-reach communities. With an area measuring about 76,363 square kilometers, about 8% of Nigeria's total land area, Niger State remains the largest state in Nigeria. We are crossing from Kebbi into Niger State's Agwara axis, a region celebrating the return of 230 students, yet mourning a massacre that happened over the weekend on January the 3rd.
This is Kasuwan Daji, or at least what remains of the market. Just this weekend, it was a bustling hub of commercial activities. And after the weekend, well, some describe it as a graveyard of goods.
While the country was focused on the release of the kidnapped Papiri students, less than 15 kilometers away, bandits stormed this location, killing over 30 persons and burning what they couldn't carry. The smell of smoke is still fresh in the air, and so also is fear.
Kudin da aka kashi, aka tara wanda aka yi hasaran kudin nan. Sai dai ko an yanka ba mu iya gane irin kudaden da aka hasara. Don kudaden gaskiya hasaran da muka yi yayi yawa.
16-year-old Ismail Marcos luckily escaped. He says that he witnessed the bloodbath while hiding inside a ceiling.
We will still get mind to come here on Sunday in the morning. No one, even soldier man, came here.
The dust is yet to settle from the attack that happened here in Kasuwan Daji in Borgu local government area of Niger State. If you look behind me, you would see that the smoke is still yet to dissipate owing to the attack that happened just on Saturday. Right now, we look around the community shows that it is indeed a shadow of itself. But one thing also remains very, very obvious, and that is the mark that was left here in this village, the mass grave that now lays by my side. From what locals are saying, this grave contains 3 individuals each.
From Kasuwan Daji, we travel for less than 30 minutes to Papiri, the location of St. Mary's Catholic School, where over 200 students and staff were abducted.
This is where the nightmare began on the 21st of November. The government says all 230 students have reportedly been free from the hands of their captors, and it has directed that schools be reopened. But with the carnage that we witnessed at Kasuwan Daji, just a few kilometers away from here, the question on the minds of many parents is simple. Is it really safe to bring our children back? This is the assembly ground of the school. If it were in session, the principal would have addressed students from this podium every day of the week.
Little Justina was enrolled for the first time as a nursery pupil. Her mother, Lydia, says the devastation of her abduction was replaced with joy following her return. But the family remained skeptical about bringing her back to school due to insecurity.
Dukansu ina ra'ayi su koma a makaranta in gwamnati zai taimaka a kawo mana tsaro mai kyau a wannan shiya musamman na St. Mary na Papiri.
They should provide more securities, soldiers, police, like that, so that we'll be free to do our work, carry out our work in a better way.
With the conflicting realities of a successful rescue and a fresh massacre, the church faces a tough decision.
We don't have much security presence there. So now, if there is anything that people need now to restore confidence, is to see large, a very strong security presence, and that is the government that can provide that.
From the ashes of Kasuwan Daji to the empty hostels in Papiri, the message is clear. Security is a luxury these communities cannot afford. Though the children are back home, but until the forests are clear, the mention of school raises palpable tension. From the bank of the river Niger, here in Rofia, Niger State, for News Central, Sagir Ibrahim.
Now to help us unpack what happened, including the immediate impact on residents' security gaps and the evolving response, we have our correspondent, Sagir Ibrahim, who has been following the story closely. Sagir, good morning. The report was amazing, and you know it takes guts, it takes courage to want to go to where these things had happened. So Sagir, do tell me, what are the things that did not make it to this report, and how was your journey heading to Kasuwan Daji and Papiri?
Good morning, Queen. Good morning, Maz. I would start by saying, first of all, you know the mantra of News Central. I mean, we're fearlessly reporting what matters most. And, you know, our editor-in-chief, he will always push us to go to the places where the voices that needs to be heard the most are. And that's just what is replicated, of course, in this report. Now, for the journey itself, it was a journey, like I mentioned in the report, across terrible roads and, of course, across rivers as well. We traveled from Abuja through Niger State to Kontagora. If you know, if you're conversant with Niger State, you know the distance between Mina and Kontagora local government. It is around a 7 hour to 7 hour 30 minutes trip from Mina to Kontagora, and that tells you how large Niger State is. Matter of fact, it is the largest state in Nigeria by land mass. Of course, from Kontagora, the journey didn't stop there. We had to pass the night over at Kontagora. Next day, we moved from Kontagora into Yauri in Kebbi State because we couldn't go to these areas. They are hard to reach, and you just cannot reach them, via roads. If you're going to be going via roads, you're going through the forest, and that is a risk that we couldn't take. So we had to go through Yauri in Kebbi State, then to Zamari, where there is a crossing between the River Niger in Kebbi and also Niger State. Then we crossed back from Zamari in Kebbi State back into Rofia. Then we entered, of course, Agua local government, which is the local government where Papiri is located. We initially had to pass Papiri because Kasuwan Daji was ahead some few kilometers, around 13, 14 kilometers, after Papiri. So we went to Kasuwan Daji first, and we saw firsthand the carnage that the assailants left behind. It was, I was teary. I cried. I must be honest with you, because for one to imagine that this level of destruction had happened the way it did, considering the fact that the residents of this community, the few of them who, of course, are brave enough to remain, and for some of them who do not have any choice because they do not have anywhere else to go, they narrated how sad the situation was, the fact that it happened in broad daylight, they said around 4 p.m., and how the attack continued unabated without the intervention, of any security agencies, whether it's the police or the army. The fact that it had to take over 24 hours before they got security presence to that location, hearing these stories just makes one wonder what the hope is for the average man in Nigeria who just wants to go about minding his business, doing business, and not wanting to pay too much heed to, the activities of government, but still you're not, isolated or insulated from activities of non-state actors, and yet you still cannot get the much-needed protection that you need in your community. So, Queen, it was a treacherous trip and, of course, a traumatic experience for us.
I'm so sorry for that traumatic experience that you had to go through, including the cameraman. But now I have to ask, the report says at least 30 people were killed. And in your report, we could see the gravesite of, 3, but you said 3 people each were in that, in that pit. Did you confirm if it was at least 30 people or there were more than that?
As a matter of fact, Queen, locals are saying the number is much more. In fact, the list that you had seen, the clip of the list you had seen, in the report actually shows, if you check the number, it goes on to around 47, 48. Before we left the community, confirmation moved from 48 to around 50 individuals, who had lost their lives. The graves you saw was just the first site of, graves where individuals were buried. There were some others that, were way into the forest. So that was more or less like a clip or a footnote for you to say, okay, this is where it happened, and giving you sort of an experience into what we saw. But of course, there are other grave sites around the vicinity, and like I mentioned, 3 individuals each. So they are all mass grave sites. But then for them, their call has remained one thing. They are farmers. They just want to go to the farm, be able to produce what they produce, take it to the market and sell. But at the moment, it's seeming even quite impossible to do that.
Sagir, the greater call is for a security outpost in this area. From your journey, looking at you alone make that journey seem like it must have been really arduous. It must have been really, really, really hard on you. We could see it in your face that you had been through much of the Niger sun. However, what's responsible for the absence of authorities, the absence of security forces or agencies inside of Kasuwan Daji and also Papiri? Is it the distance from, well, I don't know how to put this, urban areas? Is it the road networks? What exactly is responsible? And what has the authority decided to do now that the locals are calling for some security presence?
Well, for reasons, I would say they are quite multifaceted. One, I would say, is an obvious lack of infrastructure. The road is in a terrible state. There's no direct access to, at the moment, to Kasuwan Daji via Niger State through roads. Matter of fact, we understand that even the governor had to travel the same route that we traveled, through Yauri and then to Zamare in Kebbi, and then crossed the river via boat to the other side in Rofia before, subsequently entering into Agwara. So lack of infrastructure is one of those reasons. Another, security presence really low. So I would say a lack of adequate security deployments to the area. I mean, you could travel for miles and miles. You're looking at the screen, you see an individual wearing a yellow uniform. Well, he's not a security officer. For those of us who, are conversant with this actors, we know them as Karuta, or mostly they perform the function of vehicle inspection officers. But then what are you inspecting in vehicles when the roads themselves are the cause or the reasons why the vehicles are in the state or shape that they are? So road networks, lack of adequate deployment of police officers. I tell you that during my entire trip to these locations, I saw physically just one police officer, and that police officer was the one manning a checkpoint at one of the locations between Agwara and then going into the Papiri axis. So lack of infrastructure, lack of adequate deployment, a complete absence of the presence of soldiers. This is what they demanded for, and this is obviously what is missing in these communities. If there is no presence or adequate presence of security operatives or personnel, of course, it gives all sorts and all and sundry the audacity, to come in and operate the way that they want to operate. And of course, a presence of surrounding ungoverned spaces. Niger is a very, very large state, and you see it from traveling. You could see a wide area of land, forest upon forest upon forest, with no clear form of activities going on in any of these forests. Sometime in the past, we had heard the call for a forest guard. I really do not know how much or what state that level of what state they are in sense of deploying forest guards, but then there are no soldiers. So if you don't have soldiers in these areas, of course, it gives the audacity for individuals to attack. And this is the reason why they are saying, not just a security outpost, we want a military barracks. If a military barracks is present here and we have senior officers deployed with a battalion of soldiers present in these communities, that way we are guaranteed now that not just our community, but other surrounding communities will enjoy the presence of that in terms of adequate and quick responses, in terms of having boots on the ground. And it generally gives us, a feeling of safety, and we can sleep with our eyes closed, because that is not the situation now. For most of them who are still there in the community, they find it really difficult to sleep at night, because any movement, any sound, whether it's the wind trying to blow something from the rafters and it falls to the ground, everybody becomes apprehensive and everybody is running, helter-skelter, seeking for where, they could hide their heads. And another thing that one has to note here is, like I mentioned in the report, this location is not too far from Papiri, which means that some children from this community that was attacked were also, are also students of the St. Mary's Catholic School. In fact, I spoke to one particularly who was abducted, released, came back home to celebrate the Christmas festivities. Between January 1st, New Year's Day, and 3rd, the community was attacked again. So he went from trauma to trauma. I really wonder how he intends to manage and process all of this, because during my conversation with him, he says he still suffers nightmare as a result of his experience in captivity. Talk more of a recent attack where you had to see people get slaughtered.
Wow.
Mazino, Queen.
Sagir, you paint a very grim picture. You didn't just paint a picture, you put together a very stellar report on that. And I wanted to say, I don't know about everybody else here at News Central, but I wanted to acknowledge the art in your reporting, because you brought Kasuwan Daji to us here in Lagos and across the world, especially with the footage of that very eerie, quiet school. That was hot. It really got to me. So when you say you cried, I felt that. I felt that indeed. And sorry about the ordeal of getting to the location, but we pay you enough for that now, don't we? Thank you very much, Sagir Ibrahim, for joining us.
I mean, that's why I said I needed the trip to Obudu, like we were talking about.
Hey, she's got the tickets, so we're waiting for her.
All right.
Thank you so much, Sagir. Good morning.
Thank you. Morning.